First, we're all familiar with a number of disturbing encounters between law enforcement and African Americans around the country in recent months. What would you advocate to improve relations between minority communities and law enforcement within the 4th District?
Well, this is a nationwide problem that calls for a nationwide solution, I would submit to you. And as one who has been profiled and who has been pulled over, and despite the fact that my car didn't match the description that was given, and despite the fact I had my House of Delegates license plates on the back of my car, and so that certainly couldn't have been the car that was involved, I've been pulled over, and I understand the fear that many folks have when a situation, when you've done nothing at all wrong and you've been pulled over. But the question is this: what do we do? How do we improve the situation? And the way we do it, I think, is twofold. One, the United States government ought to make sure that every law enforcement agency across this Commonwealth has access and is using body cameras. You know, I had occasion, when we debated this in the General Assembly, to talk to the Chief of Police of Henrico County, and he enlightened me and told me that, you know what, he said body cameras do two things. They make the police officer act better, and they make the person on the other end of the camera act better. It de-escalates the situation. And so I certainly believe that body cameras is part of the answer. I continue to believe that we ought to invest in bias training. In other words, teaching people about the inherent biases that they have. Every single person in this room, including me, has a bias. What we need to do is make sure that our law enforcement officers are aware of the biases that they have, because they're carrying guns, they're carrying lethal weapons, and they need to be trained to understand that as they go out and to encounter someone, that person isn't some other, that person is a human being and part of society. But look, I think most of our police officers do a great job, but I believe that bias training can help fix those who aren't doing such a great job, and I believe body cameras can help de-escalate situations.
Sheriff Wade?
Yeah, I agree that body cameras do what he said they do. They calm people down, and people act different when they know they're on film. And there has been a lot of diversity training and bias training throughout the years. But, you know, we always talk about the police officer as being the one that's wrong in these situations. And the media does a poor job of, as soon as something happens, blaming it on the police officer. Some of them are wrong, no doubt, but some of them are right. I thank God that I am not one of them that's been put in that position where I pulled the trigger, because I've been in those situations where you've had your gun drawn and didn't know whether you were going to pull it. And it's a hard decision, and they're fighting for their lives. They have the right to go home. I think the greater problem in this area is the problem that we have in this country with mental illness and substance abuse. If you look at most of these incidents, it's come up month afterwards, so it's not talked about. I even asked a newspaper reporter and a TV reporter, why don't you talk about mental illness and substance abuse as it related to this? And they said, because it doesn't sell. So I really believe if we're going to solve these problems, we got to look at the whole problem and not just the police officer and the gun. You know, the majority of those people in these situations that are shot are on the way to jail. 85% of the people that are in jail, according to the paper, have substance abuse problems, and 30% of them have mental illness problems. Until this country starts to deal with those issues, we're going to continue to have problems like this. And we've got to work together and help people get the help they need and not get to this. You know, jails now are mental health institutes, and it shouldn't be that way. They should be able to get health on the outside, and family members should be able to help their mentally ill family members get assistance.
I'm absolutely stunned. I cannot believe I just heard you say that the people who have gotten shot were on their way to jail anyway. You know, the man who was shot in Minnesota with a broken taillight was not on his way to jail. You know, when I got pulled over for, you know, checking my signs at midnight, I'm that guy, right? I'm that candidate who drives around the district at midnight to make sure his signs are still up. When I got pulled over, I didn't have a mental health problem, and I wasn't on my way to jail. So, you know, Mike, I really urge you to rethink that statement, because it's just not right. I know that you haven't been pulled over like that, but it's a scary thing when you get pulled over, and I imagine it's even a scarier thing when all you're trying to do is obey a police officer's order and you get shot.
I agree that all of them aren't that way, but the majority of them do involve people that are going to jail. And you've never walked up to a car when you stopped somebody and felt the fear that you have walking up not knowing what somebody's going to do to you if coming up. There's two sides to the story, and we'll never solve the problem if we just talk about your side of the story. I agree with your side, and yours is important, but you got to talk about both sides of the story in order to solve the problem.
As long as you're going to go around thinking that everybody who's getting shot is going to jail, that's the beginning of the problem.
And with that, we are